It's Christmas Eve 2020, and anyone watching or anyone who may join me on the live feed here, thank you for tuning in to my final review of the last few chapters of the Kybalion. Okay. Chapter 12, Causation. Every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law, chance is but a name for law not yet recognized. There are many planes of causation, and nothing escapes the law. The great sixth Hermetic principle, the principle of cause and effect, embodies the truth that law pervades the universe, that nothing happens by chance, that chance is merely a term indicating cause existing but not recognized or perceived, that phenomenon is continuous without break or exception. The principle of cause and effect underlies all scientific thought, ancient and modern, and was enunciated by the Hermetic teachers in the earliest days, while many and varied disputes between the many schools of thought have since arisen. These disputes have been principally upon the details of the operations of the principle, and still more often upon the meaning of certain words. The underlying principle of cause and effect has been accepted as correct by practically all the thinkers of the world worthy of the name. To think otherwise would be to take the phenomena of the universe from the domain of law and order and to relegate it to the control of the imaginary, something which men have called chance. A little consideration will show anyone that there is in reality no such thing as pure chance. Webster defines the word chance as follows: a supposed agent or mode of activity other than a force, law, or purpose, the operation or activity of such agent, the supposed effect of such an agent, a happening, fortuity, casualty, etc. But a little consideration will show you that there can be no such agent as chance, in the sense of something outside of law, something outside of cause and effect. How could there be a something acting in the phenomenal universe independent of the laws, order, and continuity of the latter? Such a something would be entirely independent of the orderly trend of the universe and therefore superior to it. We can imagine nothing outside the all being outside of the law, and that only because the all is the law in itself. There is no room in the universe for something outside of and independent of law. The existence of such a something would render all laws ineffective and would plunge the universe into chaotic disorder and lawlessness. So that makes me think, the all, when the all acts as in its own agency, is the only exception to the universal laws. And this is completely proven. And even atheists pretty much have to admit this is true as proof of what they have to admit as God's existence. And I'm serious about that. I mean, I'm not talking about, your squawky atheists on Facebook or wherever. I'm talking about, the most elite scientists have to admit this when the argument is posed to them in this way, and that's this: that the current scientific consensus is that the laws of the universe essentially acted, and the all is the law itself, but the laws of the universe acted in a way such that it made the universe exist, caused the universe to come into being. I'm trying to avoid the word created, because a lot of the more advanced sages don't think it was an act of creation necessarily, as it was, more
spontaneity as a child that sort of just does things willy-nilly, and that's more like the action of God than like this, omnipotent demiurge creator. Although that's not really inaccurate either. It's it gets to the points where it's semantics because these things are beyond words. Okay, so the all is the only exception to those laws, though, and that's why there is no such thing as random chance. A careful examination will show you that what we call chance is merely an expression relating to obscure causes. Causes that we cannot perceive, causes that we cannot understand. The word chance is derived from the word meaning to fall, as the falling of dice. The idea being that the fall of the dice, and many other happenings, are merely a happening unrelated to any cause. And this is the sense in which the term is generally employed, but when the matter is closely examined, it is seen that there is no chance whatsoever about the fall of the dice. Each time the die falls and displays a certain number, it obeys a law as infallible as that which governs the revolution of the planets around the sun. Back of the fall of the die are causes, or chains of causes running back further than the mind can follow. So, that's really the gist of this chapter, is that everything has a cause, and no matter how random it is, anything that you observe, the fact that I just clicked my pen right there, has a cause that goes way beyond the fact that I consciously chose to click the pen. Anything that happens. So how useful is it to look here and look at that zip tie and say, why is that zip tie just lying on the ground like that? Why, what are the chains of causes behind it, and how can I don't know, apply that to my life? And that's sort of rambling. Okay, chapter 13, gender. The great seventh Hermetic principle, the principle of gender, embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, that the masculine and feminine principles are ever present and active in all phases of phenomena, in each and every plane of life. At this point, we think it will to call your attention to the fact that gender, in the Hermetic sense, and sex, in the ordinarily accepted use of the term, are not the same. So not to get into the whole transgender argument, but yes, it must be said that gender and sex aren't the same thing. Biological sex is one thing, gender is quite another. And yes, I would have to agree that shoehorning people into those archetypes has been harmful. I would definitely say that growing up trying to conform to the expectations of my father as a masculine archetype, and he played it very well, was not helpful to me. And it goes way beyond that. It's a cultural thing. At the same time, I'm not going to go and make an entire religion out of transgenderism, and I think that it's just as harmful to take that to the nth degree. Point is that with everything in the universe, it doesn't really... You can't extrapolate it to the point where you apply absolute male or absolute female to every single thing. Although, loosely speaking, all the matter that we observe, all the natural organisms that we observe, would fall cleanly into either male or female. There are more genders in nature, different organisms. Of course, I don't want to get into that. It's just male and female are the archetypes, together of which are expressions of the all. What we call male and female descends from a celestial archetype, and celestial beings have gender as well. Okay, so the office of gender is solely that of creating, producing, generating, etc. And its manifestations are visible in every plane of phenomena. It is somewhat difficult to produce proofs of this along scientific lines, for the reason that science has not yet recognized this principle as of universal application. But still, some proofs are forthcoming from scientific sources. In the first place,
we find a distinct manifestation of the principle of gender among the corpuscles, ions, or electrons, which constitute the basis of matter, as science now knows the latter, and which, by forming certain combinations from the atom, which until lately was neglected as final and indivisible. The latest word of science is that the atom is composed of a multitude of corpuscles, electrons, or ions, the various names being applied by different authorities, revolving around each other and vibrating at a high degree and intensity. But the accompanying statement is made that the formation of the atom is really due to the clustering of negative corpuscles around a positive one. The positive corpuscles seeming to exert a certain influence upon the negative corpuscles, causing the latter to assume certain combinations and thus create or generate an atom. This is in line with the most ancient Hermetic teachings, which have always identified the masculine principle of gender with the positive and the feminine with the negative poles of electricity. Now, a word at this point regarding this identification. Basically, this is going to go on to say that positive and negative, in terms of chemistry especially, are arbitrary, and to say that feminine is negative isn't quite accurate, or doesn't have the right connotation for one. For the other, the term cathode is a better designation for this feminine principle. Some leading scientific investigators have announced a belief that in the formation of crystals there is also found something to be correspondent to sex activity, which is another straw showing the direction the scientific winds are blowing. And each year will bring other facts to corroborate the correctness of the Hermetic principle of gender. It will be found that gender is in constant operation and manifestation in the field of inorganic matter and in the field of energy or force. Electricity is now generally regarded as the something into which all other forms of energy seem to melt or dissolve. The electrical theory of the universe is the latest scientific doctrine and is growing rapidly in popularity and general acceptance. I guess at the time of the publication of this, which was what, in the 1800s? And it thus follows that if we are able to discover in the phenomena of electricity, even at the very root and source of its manifestations, a clear and unmistakable evidence that of the presence of gender and its activities, we are justified in asking you to believe that science at last has offered proof of the existence in all universal phenomena of the great Hermetic principle of gender. Alright, mental gender, chapter 16. I think we're about done here. Students of psychology who have followed the modern trend of thought along the lines of mental phenomena are struck by the persistence of the dual mind idea, which has manifested itself so strongly during the past 10 or 15 years, and which has given rise to a number of plausible theories regarding the nature and constitutions of these two minds. The late Thomas J. Hudson attained great popularity in 1893 by advancing this well-known theory of the objective and subjective mind, which he held existed in every individual. Other various writers have attracted almost equal attention by the theories regarding the conscious and subconscious minds, of the voluntary and involuntary minds, the active and passive minds. The theories of the various writers differ from each other, but there remain the underlying principles of the duality of mind. The student of the Hermetic philosophy is tempted to smile when he reads and hears of these many new theories regarding the duality of mind, each school adhering tenaciously to its own pet theories and each claiming to have discovered the truth, quote unquote. The student turns back the pages of occult history, and away back in the dim beginnings of occult teachings, he finds references to the ancient Hermetic doctrine of the principle of gender. On the mental plane, the manifestation of mental gender. And examining further, he finds that the ancient philosophy took cognizance of the phenomena of the dual mind and accounted for it by the theory of mental gender. This idea of mental gender may be explained in a few words to students. who are familiar with the modern theories just alluded to, the masculine principle of mind corresponds to the so-called objective mind, conscious mind, voluntary mind, active mind, etc. And the feminine principle of mind corresponds to the so-called subjective mind, subconscious mind, involuntary mind, passive mind. Of course, the Hermetic teachings do not agree with many modern theories regarding the nature of the two phases of mind, nor does it admit many of the facts claimed for the two respective aspects. So, of the said theories and claims being very far-fetched and incapable of standing the test of experiment and demonstration. The Hermetic teachers impart their instructions regarding this subject by bidding their students examine the report of their consciousness regarding their self. The students are bidden to turn their attention inward upon the self dwelling within each. Each student is led to see that his consciousness gives him first a report of the existence of his self. The report is, I am. This at first seems to be the final words from the consciousness, but a little further examination discloses that this I am may be separated or split into two distinct parts or aspects, which while working in unison and in conjunction, yet nevertheless may be separated in consciousness. While at first there seems to be only an I existing, a more careful examination reveals the fact that there exists an I and a me. These mental twins differ in their characteristics in nature, and an examination of their nature and the phenomena arising from the same will throw much light upon the problems of mental illness. Influence. Freudian slip. Let us begin with consideration of the me, which is usually mistaken for the I by the student until he presses the inquiry a little further back into the recesses of consciousness. A man thinks of his self and its aspect of me as being composed of certain feelings, tastes, likes, dislikes, habits, peculiar ties, characteristics, etc., all of which go to make up his personality or the self known to himself and others. He knows that these emotions and feelings change, are born and die away, are subject to the principle of rhythm and the principle of polarity, in which take him from one extreme of feeling to another. He also thinks of the me as being certain knowledge gathered together in his mind and thus forming a part of himself. This is the me of man. But we have proceeded too hastily. The me of many men may be said to consist largely of their consciousness of the body and their physical appetites, etc. Their consciousness being largely bound up with their bodily nature, they practically live there. Some men even go so far as to regard their personal apparel as part of their me, and actually seem to consider it as part of themselves. A writer has humorously said that men consist of three parts: soul, body, and clothes. These clothes conscious people would lose their personality if divested of their clothing by savages upon the occasion of a shipwreck. But many who are not so closely bound up with the idea of personal raiment stick closely to the consciousness of their bodies being their me. They cannot conceive of a self independent of the body. Their mind seems to them to be practically as something belonging to their body, which in many cases it is indeed. But as man rises in the scale of consciousness, he is able to disentangle his me from his idea of body, and is able to think of his body as belonging to the mental part of him. But even then, he is very apt to identify the me entirely with the mental state, feelings, etc., which he feels to exist within him. He is very apt to consider these things internal states as identical with himself, instead of there being simply things produced by some part of his mentality existed within him, of him, and in him, but still not himself. He sees that he may change these internal states of feeling by all effort of will, and that he may produce a feeling or state of an exact opposite nature. And so after a while, he is able to set aside these various mental states, emotions, feelings, habits, qualities, characteristics, and other personal mental belongings. He is able to set them aside in the not me collection of curiosities and encumbrances, as well as valuable possessions. This requires much mental concentration and power of mental analysis on the part of the student, but still the task is possible for the advanced student, and even the not so far advanced are able to see in the imagination how the process may be performed. The me will be felt to be a something mental in which the me will be felt to be a something mental in which thoughts, ideas, emotions, feelings, and other mental states may be produced. It may be considered that the mental womb, as the ancients styled it, capable of generating mental offspring. It reports the consciousness as a me, with latent powers of creation, generation of mental progeny of all sorts and kinds. The powers of creative energy are felt to be enormous, but still it seems to be conscious that it must receive some form of energy from either its I companion or else some other I, ere it able to bring into being its mental creations. The consciousness brings with it a realization of an enormous capacity for mental work and creative ability. The student soon finds that this is not all that he finds within his inner consciousness. He finds that there exists a mental something which is able to will that the me act along certain creative lines, and which is able to stand aside and witness the mental creation as part of himself, is taught to call his I. He is taught to call his I. He is able to rest in his consciousness at will. He finds there is not a consciousness of an ability to generate and actively create. Great. So, the student of psychic phenomena is aware of the wonderful phenomena classified under the head of telepathy, thought, transference, mental influence, suggestion, hypnotism, etc. Many have sought for an explanation of these varied phases of phenomena under the theories of the various dual mind teachers. And in a measure they are right, for there is clearly a manifestation of two distinct phases of mental activity. But if such students will consider these dual minds in the light of the Hermetic teachings regarding vibration of mental gender, they will see that the long sought for key is at hand. That's going to take one more rereading, I think. Mental gender. A lot of it that was just running together. There was noise. Okay. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art. In the above axiom, the Hermetists teach that the great work of influencing one's environment is accompanied by mental power, the universe being wholly mental. It follows that it may be ruled only by mentality, and in this truth is to be found an explanation of all the phenomena and manifestations of the various mental powers which are attracting so much attention and study in these early years of the 20th century. Back of and under the teachings of the various cults and schools remain ever constant the principle of the mental substance of the universe. If the universe be mental in its substantial nature, then it follows that the mental transmutation must change the conditions and phenomena of the universe. If the universe is mental, then mind must be the highest power affecting its phenomena. If this be understood, then all the so-called miracles and wonder workings are plainly for what they are seen plainly for what they are. The all is mind. The universe is mental. Fini.